Here are the headlines for Thursday evening, August 29, 2024. People's Liberation Army will unify Taiwan. Chinese general confronted Sullivan just before surprise exit meeting. Jake Sullivan, the National Security Advisor of the United States, met with Chinese leader Xi Jinping in Beijing, marking the first such trip for a sitting U.S. National Security Advisor in 8 years. However, the most tense moment came earlier when Sullivan was confronted by General Zhang Yuxia, one of China's vice chairs of the Central Military Commission, over growing U.S. support for Taiwan's military. Zhang informed Sullivan that reunification of Taiwan with the mainland is the mission and responsibility of the Chinese PLA military and that it won't be deterred. Sullivan looked nervous throughout the encounter, while Zhang appeared confident. But Brazil's Darth Vader blocks Starlink bank accounts as war with Elon Musk escalates. A Brazilian Supreme Court judge, Alexandre de Moraes, has blocked the financial accounts of Elon Musk-owned Starlink holdings due to the absence of an attorney. Moraes previously threatened to suspend social media platform X unless Musk appointed a new legal representative within 24 hours. The move comes as part of an ongoing probe into social media accounts, allegedly spreading misinformation and hate speech, with Moraes accusing Musk of inciting crime and disrespecting Brazilian sovereignty. Musk has responded by calling Moraes a dictator and predicting that he will eventually end up in prison. First United States made F-16 jet downed in Ukraine during combat, pilot killed. Ukrainian officials have confirmed that F-16 fighter jet crashed during combat in Ukraine skies, resulting in the death of its pilot, Alexei Mies, also known as Moonfish. The crash occurred just weeks after an initial batch of around 12 American-made F-16 aircraft were transferred to Kiev's armed forces. The incident is considered a significant embarrassment for Ukraine and the United States, given that the program was publicly touted as a game-changer by Ukrainian government officials. Mies was one of Kiev's first pilots to be trained on the F-16 and had played a key role in lobbying efforts to secure the aircraft for Ukraine. Who is running the country? Biden on the beach for 2 weeks. President Joe Biden is under scrutiny for his frequent vacations, including a recent 9-day holiday in Delaware, prompting questions about who is running the country. After spending a week in Santa Barbara, California, Biden returned to Delaware via Air Force One, which cost $177,843 per hour to run. The total cost of this holiday alone is estimated to be at least $500,000, and given that Biden spends almost half his presidency on vacation, the costs are likely in the tens or hundreds of millions of dollars. Critics argue that Biden's frequent absences highlight the deep state's control over the country, with some suggesting that figures like George Soros, Barack Obama, Nancy Pelosi, Hillary Clinton, Chuck Schumer, and Hakeem Jeffries are actually running the United States. Lulu, Prince Lemons, Ulta gets ugly as shawties spend less on plumage. Ulta Beauty and Lululemon reported disappointing results, with Ulta lowering its annual projections for comparable sales and profit after weaker than expected second quarter results, causing shares to plunge as much as 8% in after-hours trading. Lululemon also lowered its sales and profit outlook for the year, citing frugal consumers and increased competition, with sales growth in North America slowing due to persistent inflation, higher interest rates, and a cooling job market. Palin wins appeal on defamation case against the New York Times. A former Alaska governor, Sarah Palin, must retry her defamation case against the New York Times after a federal appeals court ruled that the trial judge made an error in dismissing the jury before it reached a verdict. The decision could potentially lead to a re-examination of the landmark Supreme Court case New York Times v. Sullivan, which established a higher burden of proof for public figures alleging defamation. Critics argue that this standard is too lenient and provides a shield for media outlets at the expense of individuals' reputation. Hindenburg target Tingo Mobile found liable for brazen fraud by federal judge after ignoring Securities and Exchange Commission lawsuit. A federal judge in the United States District Court has found Tingo Mobile liable for financial fraud after failing to respond to the Securities and Exchange Commission's lawsuit against them. The SEC accused Tingo of inflating its financial performance metrics, fabricating financial statements, and defrauding investors worldwide. Judge Jesse Furman ruled in favor of the regulators, calling the fraud brazen and stating that the magnitude of the scheme is quite something. The SEC alleged that almost every aspect of Tingo's business was fabricated, including its partners and financials, with the company claiming to have $461,700,000 in cash when it had only $50 in its bank account. A sales recovery did not occur, pending home sales crashed to a record low. The National Association of Realtors reported that pending home sales in the United States tumbled 5.5% month over month in July, missing expectations of a 0.2% gain, and also slumped 4.6% year over year. This decline brought the pending home sales index to a fresh record low of 70.2%. According to National Association of Realtors chief economist Lawrence Yun, job growth and higher inventory could not overcome affordability challenges and some degree of wait and see related to the upcoming United States presidential election. United States geopolitical hubris presents terrifying fat tail risks. The global system is plagued by institutional hubris, where central banks and geopolitical experts prioritize their own ideologies over complex reality. The history of central banking is intimately linked to war, which is staggeringly expensive. Similarly, the history of geopolitics should be closely tied to war, as getting it wrong can have severe consequences. To address looming fat tail risks, a more pragmatic approach is needed, one that acknowledges the need for increased military spending and fiscal expansion. The United States, Europe, Japan, and South Korea are in a precarious position, with massive increases in defense spending required to fill gaps and prevent geopolitical decline. 2 GDP unexpectedly revised higher on bizarre surge in personal consumption. The Bureau of Economic Analysis reported that the United States economy grew at a rate of 3.0% in the second quarter, which is higher than expected. This growth was driven primarily by an unexpected surge in personal consumption, which jumped 2.9%. The strong spending data has reduced the likelihood of a 50 basis point interest rate cut in September, with some experts predicting that the Federal Reserve will instead deliver 75 basis points to avoid causing a market upset and stay ahead of the growth curve. China is rethinking its Russian pipeline plans. China appears to be reconsidering the Power of Siberia 2 gas pipeline project with Russia, as indicated by Mongolia's exclusion of funding for the pipeline in its economic plan. Turkmenistan has emerged as a favored gas supplier for China, with increased cooperation and higher gas export revenue compared to Russia in 2024. Experts suggest that China sees Turkmenistan as a more manageable partner for energy projects due to its simpler economy and easier to negotiate with political leadership. IDF fires missiles on West Bank mosque, killing top terror commander in day 2 of incursion. Israeli military and security forces have launched a large-scale raid into the West Bank, resulting in at least 14 Palestinian deaths over 2 days. The operation involves hundreds of Israeli Defense Forces troops and Shin Bet security personnel who are targeting militants in the towns of Jenin, Tulkarem, and Tubas. Fighter jets, drones, and bulldozers are being used to focus counter-terror efforts, with drone strikes on vehicles also playing an active role. The raid is the biggest seen in at least 2 decades and has been met with international criticism over the apparent expansion of the Gaza war into the Palestinian Authority-administered West Bank. Central Intelligence Agency lays out its view of Kursk operation for first time. A top Central Intelligence Agency official has commented on Ukraine's incursion into Russian territory, which began on August 6th and resulted in hundreds of square miles coming under Ukrainian military control. The deputy director of the Central Intelligence Agency, David Cohen, stated that it will be a difficult fight for Russia as they try to reclaim their lost territory, citing the challenge of dealing with a front line within Russian territory and the reverberations back in Russian society. Nvidia dumps, gold pumps as Dollar General craters the most on record. Nvidia's stock initially surged after the company reported strong second quarter earnings, but then dropped due to disappointing third quarter guidance, ultimately losing 6% of its value and $200 billion in market capitalization. The Nasdaq index also struggled despite a brief rebound, while the Russell index performed well as investors focused on the Federal Reserve's potential rate cut in September, which is expected to benefit small-cap companies with high debt levels. Oil prices rebounded above $80 per barrel due to concerns about Libyan production, causing yields to rise and hitting a one-week high of nearly 3.9%. The strong oil recovery combined with a hotter-than-expected GDP print and low initial jobless claims suggests that the next jobs report will be stronger than expected, which could lead to higher interest rates in the future. This to allow salvage crews to access the oil tanker they hit in the Red Sea. The Iran-aligned Houthi movement has agreed to allow salvage crews to access an oil tanker that was hit by a missile in the Red Sea earlier this month. The tanker, which is leaking oil, poses both a navigational hazard and a potential environmental catastrophe, with close to 1 million barrels of crude oil on board. The Greek-flagged oil tanker, the Sullivan, had 25 crew members who were rescued by a European warship and transported to Djibouti after the vessel was struck by missiles or drones approximately 90 miles from the Yemeni port city of Hodeidah. Goldman says Five Below's earnings indicate core customer pressure and is reducing discretionary spending. Five Below reported second quarter comparable sales that beat analysts' expectations despite lowering its full-year forecast. The discount retailer's net sales reached $830 million, a 9.4% year-over-year increase, while comparable sales declined by 5.7%. Kate McShane of Goldman noted that declines in average ticket prices and units per transaction suggest Five Below's core customers are reducing discretionary spending due to pressure. Although traffic trends have improved, conversion rates remain pressured with diverging trends between income cohorts, indicating some trade down is taking place. 2/3 of Americans now believe that the American dream is unattainable becomes 2/3 of Americans now believe that the American dream is unattainable. The American dream is no longer attainable for most of the population in the United States, with only 1/3 of adults believing it still exists. A brand new Wall Street Journal NORC poll found that only 10% of Americans believe becoming a homeowner is easy or somewhat easy, despite 89% viewing homeownership as essential or important to their vision of the future. Home prices have set another all-time record high, with United States home prices up more than 1,000% since 1974. The housing crisis has led to millions of people struggling to buy homes, and many are now living in their vehicles due to unaffordable housing option. ISPAC e-learning engines plunges 55% after Hindenburg alleges artificial partners and artificial revenue. Shares of e-learning engines, Inc. have plummeted by over 50% after short seller Hindenburg Research published a report alleging that the artificial intelligence company has fabricated partnerships and revenue. The firm claims that nearly all of iLearning Engine's revenue and expenses in 2022 were run through an undisclosed related party, which was later revealed to be a technology partner sharing a listed address with the company's CEO's home residence. Additionally, Hindenburg Research disputes iLearning Engine's claim of having $216 million in annual revenue in the Indian market, citing financials for its sole Indian subsidiary that reported only $853,471 in revenue for its latest fiscal year. OpenAI agrees to run GPT models past United States government to evaluate for safety. The National Institute of Standards and Technology announced that OpenAI and Anthropic have agreed to collaborate with the United States Artificial Intelligence Safety Institute to evaluate their new artificial intelligence models' capabilities and risks. The institute will provide feedback on potential safety improvements with a focus on responsible innovation and stewardship of the future of artificial intelligence. This partnership is seen as an important milestone in promoting safe and trustworthy artificial intelligence development, with both companies expressing support for the institute's mission and looking forward to working together to inform safety, best practices, and standards. Only 10 days left. The market is driven by change, and the current bid will soon fade away. There are $6,620 million worth of daily purchasing power available until the closed window, where it normally gets reduced by half or more. The blackout period starts on the 13th, which is only 10 trading days away, and the market often pre-trades this event. Life after Nvidia. Asset managers currently hold the lowest net long position since November 2023, which should sustain demand for technology stocks. Federal Reserve's pivot is misguided. Jerome Powell's recent speech at the Federal Reserve Conference in Jackson Hole signaled a pivot in monetary policy, but Peter Schiff remains unconvinced that there's sufficient evidence to support rate cuts in September. The Fed's dual mandate to fight inflation and unemployment is proving problematic, as improving one often worsens the other. Meanwhile, this year's Democratic National Convention saw unprecedented vilification of Donald Trump, with many criticisms being outright lies. However, Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s endorsement of Trump for president has created a legitimate threat to the establishment, and their revitalized ticket may take action to end wasteful wars around the world. Apple boosts iPhone orders by 10% betting on artificial intelligence upgrade supercycle. Apple is expected to unveil the latest version of the iPhone with artificial intelligence features at its upcoming event in September, which could spark a larger than normal smartphone upgrade cycle. The company has ordered components and parts for between 88 million and 90 million iPhones, compared to initial orders of around 80 million. Analysts predict that the AI-enabled iPhone will unleash Apple's biggest upgrade cycle in history, with developers expected to build hundreds of generative AI-driven apps over the next 6 to 12 months. However, there are concerns about whether consumers will be willing to pay over $1,000 for new smartphones during a period of high inflation and interest rates. Oil jumps as Libyan oil shutdown deepens with loading halt at 5 main terminals. The price of oil is spiking due to news of Libyan oil turmoil, with Brent rising as much as 3% and briefly topping $80 per barrel. Libya has suspended oil exports from 5 eastern ports, and the country's output has dipped further amid an escalating stalemate over who controls the central bank. The terminals have a combined capacity of around 800,000 barrels a day, which means almost all of Libyan output remains landlocked. This development is adding to concerns about global supply, particularly as the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries Plus considers increasing production later in the year 2024. Apple, Nvidia investments in OpenAI as ChatGPT hits $100 billion valuation. Bloomberg reports that Nvidia is in talks to invest in Microsoft-backed OpenAI through a new funding round, while Apple is also reportedly discussing an investment in the chatbot startup, which could value it at $100 billion. This potential investment comes as Apple prepares for its big iPhone launch event and gears up to gain ground in the artificial intelligence race, with Wedbush analyst Dan Ives predicting that the AI-enabled iPhone will unleash Apple's biggest upgrade cycle in history. Subpar 7-year auction tails as direct bidders tumble to lowest since March 2020. The United States Treasury sold $44 billion in 7-year paper in the week's final coupon auction, resulting in a subpar auction with a high yield of 3.77%. This yield was 39 basis points tighter than last month's 7-year auction and marked the lowest yield on the tenor since April 2023. The bid to cover dropped to 2.5% from 2.637% last month, while indirect takedowns rose to 75.1%, above the recent average of 69.22%. Stocks are all in on a soft landing, but what if they're wrong? The stock market expects a soft landing for the economy, but this assessment may be overly optimistic, leaving room for a 15 to 35% decline in stock prices if history is any guide. Meanwhile, the bond market, often considered a better indicator of economic trends than stocks, is more cautious in its outlook.